And so there I was. I said, well, okay, where's this park? Where's this pond? Okay, so I found out where it was, and I went there to enjoy this class for 5 days. And there was about 6 or 7 other late arrivals there, and we were standing there around this nice little pond out in this park, and sort of wondering what we were going to do. And a few other people showed up, and then finally the professor who was going to teach our class showed up, and his name was Dr. Yellowhawk. Well, here he came with his Sioux dress on, you know, the leather and all the stuff hanging off, with a feather in his hair and this long braided hair going down. Now, he was a doctor of theology, and he was a great missionary. But the only Indians I had ever seen back in the 70s were in movies, and they were usually dead, you see. I had never seen a real Indian before. An actual member of the Sioux Nation. His name was Yellowhawk. And he decided to start teaching our class, and we all sat down kind of in the grass. And I was mesmerized from the beginning. There was a light that came out of this man's eyes. It wasn't like the sun was shining on him. It was like he was shining on us. I had never seen that kind of calmness and that kind of peace. And you know, when I preach, I'm excited. I have a loud voice. But he was very quiet, very soft. Almost, you know, you couldn't hardly hear him some of the time. But anyway, he began to speak. And he talked to us about the 7 major teachings of the Sioux Nation and how it related to Christianity. And it was one of the most amazing lectures I had ever heard. For 5 days we learned about what the Sioux people believed and how that related to what Jesus had taught. Now, the last day was a subject, the last of the great teachings of the Sioux Nation is on truth. And so he taught us about truth. And on that day, he asked us to gather around a little closer to the table. He had a bucket there, and he asked one of us to go out into the pond there nearby and get some water in that bucket. Meanwhile, he drug in front of us an ice chest, and then there was a fire over here. Somebody had started a fire in the middle of August in Oklahoma. I couldn't believe it. And there was a pot on there. And when the bucket of the water came back, he took the bucket of water and he poured it in that pot. And then he set the bucket back down on the table. And then he asked one of us to come up and say, what is in the bucket? And of course, we knew what was in the bucket. It's water in the bucket. And then he explained to us as he dipped it in with his hands and let it go back. He said, in the Sioux Nation, agua is vida. He didn't say it in Spanish. Water is life. Life is water. And then he went on to explain this amazing thought that I had never had before in my life. He said, listen, water is always water. It sounds like such a simple idea. But the more I thought about it, you know, that's true. Water is always water. And he said, truth is not a doctrine. Truth is not a set of beliefs. Truth is the essence of something. It is what it is. And water is water. And water will always be water. The truth of water is that water is water. You cannot get it any more basic than that. It is the basic essence. And then he went on to point out, he says, some water comes in a bucket, but it doesn't matter what the container is. It doesn't matter what the container is. Water is water. And then he opened the ice chest and he pulled out a big old block of ice and he held it there for a moment. And he said, it may also take different forms. Ice is water. Water is ice. Water is water. Ice is water. You begin to think like that. You begin to understand that no matter what container it was in, that no matter what form it was in, water was still water. And then he went over to where there was steam coming off of the pot. And it was going up into the skies. And he said, you know, steam is water. Water is steam. Steam leaves, goes away, disappears. But the water always comes back. Wow. Wow. It was like the mind that opened up. And I begin to wonder, how is this connected to the story today about the light that Jesus turned into? What's the connection? What is that connection? And then he went on to explain to us. Christ is Christ. Christ is life. Life is Christ. Christ is always Christ. And it doesn't make any difference what container it comes in. Oh, it came in the container of Jesus, all right. Yes, but it was the Christ that was important. Oh, yes, it took all kinds of forms in this world, but it's always the Christ. The Christ has always been with us. The Christ is with us now. And if the Christ should turn into spirit and steam, the Christ will return. Same as the water. This is the essence of God, he said. Christ is the essence of God, and God is love. Christ is love. Love unconditional, love encouraging, love forgiving. That's the essence of God, and it is God, and it is real, and it is life, and that's the truth. It's the essence of God. It is who God is. God is the truth about our life and the lives of others in this world. The truth about who God is love. And God is that. Always has been. Always will be. And if God should ever disappear like the steam into the sky, God will return. You see, this was the point he wanted to make. And so, it became obvious that this shining light that the disciples saw in Jesus was this essence of God. It was like Jesus opened up himself and wham, out came the essence of God. All you could see was the essence of God. It was so bright it blinded you. And then, to make sure we understood, Moses was seen. Elijah was seen. And the point was simply this. The essence of God is in Moses. The essence of God is in Elijah. The essence of God is in Jesus. The essence of God is in all life, everywhere, all the places in this world. The essence of life is everywhere. It is the divine life. And yes, it was in Jesus, but it was also and is also in us, especially after the resurrection. We can understand that's the case. And then he made a point that I had never thought of nor heard any of my seminary professors say. Because the voice says, "This is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased. This is my beloved Son, whom I love. Listen to him." That voice was speaking at the time all three figures were standing before the disciples. Who and which one was he talking about? Was Moses his son? Elijah his son? Jesus his son? Or were not all of them his son? You see? God was saying to his disciples that day, this essence of God, this Christ is my Son. And it doesn't make any difference who that Christ manifests itself in. It is still the Christ, and it is still my Son, and it is still whom you should listen to. Because it's the essence of God. That's the important point. Let me tell you, I left that seminar wishing that I could listen to Yellow Hawk for a long, long time. I really did. I even thought about dressing like a Sioux when I went back to my church. But I thought better of that idea. But that's the point of the story. This is what Jesus was signifying that day. That there is this essence of God that is in each and every one of us. It's called the Christ. And I know we say in the church that you need to receive Christ into your life, but where do you think the Christ is to begin with? In your heart already. You just need to receive it, acknowledge it, know that it's there. This is the point. Every one of us can shine. But what does that shining look like? What does it look like if somebody is transfigured? Huh? What does it look like? Got one more little story to tell you about that. I call it the lights of Yungia. Yungia is a valley about an hour from here, south of Cuenca. And if you've never been to Yungia, let me tell you, it's one of the most beautiful places I have ever seen in the whole world. There's a turnoff right near Huron. Many of you have been to Huron? And it overlooks that valley. And you see the entire valley from one end to the other. Mountains as far as you can see to Peru. Green valleys, rivers. It's an amazing... I felt like Moses the first time I saw it. Standing up there looking at the promised land. It's a beautiful place. But there was a sad story in that place that we discovered here in Cuenca a few years back. There was an orphanage down there in that valley tucked away in a little forest far off of the road that you wouldn't know where it was. And we found out that in that orphanage there were 35 children. All of them handicapped or mentally disabled. All of them had been abandoned by their parents. We called them orphans, but they weren't orphans. They were abandoned children because their parents couldn't figure out what to do with them, so they just left them on the side of the road. And here they were. Some of them had cerebral palsy. Some of them had all kinds of mental difficulties. Others were simply disabled. They couldn't walk. Some of them couldn't talk. And here were these 35 children in this so-called orphanage. And someone among the gringos discovered that the government of Ecuador had cut back the funding to nothing but just 1 or 2 cooks. No teachers, no therapists, no supervisors, no nothing. The electricity had been cut off. The sewer did not work. And you had these 35 poor children suffering there, alone, going to bed before dark because there was no lights, with nothing to eat but rice and beans, and that was it. Someone found that place and told us here in Cuenca about it. And there were people in ICC at that time who have since moved on to other places in the world. Many of us were touched by it. And many of us from ICC and other places in Cuenca, persons that weren't even in a church anywhere, everybody that heard about that story, their hearts were touched. And we had a group of volunteers that got together, and we drove all the way down there, an hour and a half drive down, an hour and a half back. And we surveyed the situation, and our hearts were touched. And we realized there was so much work to be done. So we organized a group in favor of those young children. And we came back and we started to work. And we made sure that we had weekly grocery deliveries down there with actual milk in there and actual meat in there. And then we took down there some other folks that could start arts and crafts for these children. We took down there somebody that could play the guitar, who could play the guitar and dance with these children. And we brightened that place up. And it was a tremendous experience for all of us who went there. And we discovered, as I said, the sewer did not work. The water, I would never have drunk that water in 100 years. So there we were, all these volunteers coming from all over the place. Every state in the Union almost. Some Christian, some not. But every one of them touched by the need and wanting to do something for those children. It was a great experience. Today I want to share with you 3 stories from that group of people to show you what transfiguration looks like. The first one I'm remembering and I could tell you about all of them, but we don't have time to do that. The first one that comes to my mind was a woman named Jolene. Her husband Ron had Parkinson's disease. She had gone through at least 2 different divorces in her life. She was scared to death of life. She was afraid to do very much at all. She just wanted to stay in her condo and play cards with her friends. But she heard about this, and it touched her heart. And she decided she could go down there to Yungia and do something about it. And so she joined with us. And she went down there, as many of us did, and she sat and played with the children. And she talked to the children. These children just needed to be hugged. They just needed somebody to pay attention to them for a while. And Jolene was great about that. She had this cutest, wonderful little smile. And she would talk to them, this timid, fearful woman. And one day I was walking by the table where she was helping this young boy who had cerebral palsy. You know what that is? His muscles just contract in a strange and weird way. And she was trying to help him learn how to draw. And of course he was all over the place with his drawer. But she was just encouraging him. That's okay, está bien, está bien. And then all of a sudden he had a jerk in his muscle and the crayons and the paper all went off onto the floor. And I looked at it just a moment. And I saw Jolene. She took him and she just started stroking his hair because he was crying and crying. And then she held him and she started bending over, picking up the crayons and the paper. And then she happened to look at me and I looked at her. I didn't see Jolene anymore. I saw a light. I saw a light. I saw in her the light of God. Brighter than any clothes could ever be bleached. Just a moment, just a brief moment I saw that. She was no longer the timid, afraid, scared woman that couldn't even get out of the condo. She was the light of God and had been transfigured into that light. You see? Another one I can remember, and this was a great one too. His name was Bob. Bob was from Canada. And he was a big, heavy-set guy, kind of tall, kind of old, and he loved to drink his rum. Absolutely. Always had a chewed-off cigar in his mouth. He came to ICC for a little while, has moved back to Canada since. But the thing about it is he was a plumber, been a plumber all his life. And he heard the story of these poor children. And Bob said, I'm going to go down there and see what I can do. He never said much. But he said, I'm going to go down there and see what I can do. And he gathered up some of his drinking buddies. And we got on the bus with us and we all went down there. And we found out that they needed to replace 100 meters of pipe. That's a lot of pipe. And plus the pump was totally shot. And all of these problems. But he looked at me and kind of spit a little bit and he said, don't worry, we'll take care of it. I said, fine. They must have gone down there for 5 or 6 months. Twice a week they went down there. Him and his friends. They bought all the pipe. They bought all the stuff that was needed down there. And they went down day after day down there. And it was in the hot time because Yonggi is a lower valley. It's not cool and nice like up here. And so one day as I was walking by the area where they were working, they had been digging this huge trench. And it was getting close to time for us to leave. We had to go on back, get to Cuenca before dark, and everybody needed to get on the bus. And I was looking for Bob, and so I called out, I said, Bob, where are you? And all of a sudden his head kind of pops up from this ditch. That's how deep it was. And he was covered with mud and slime and dust on his face. And he said, here I am. And let me tell you, the smell coming from that made me want to throw up. But he was down there in the middle of it, digging it. And I said, Bob, it's time to go home. Let's go. Get in the bus. And he says, and I said, well, where are the other guys that were working with you? What happened? He said, they're gone home. They're already getting cleaned up. And I said, well, we need to leave in about 5 minutes. And he took off those old glasses and he looked at me and he said, listen, y'all go on ahead. I'm about to hit the main sewer line and there's going to be a bunch of bad stuff. Come out. He said, I don't want to just leave it like that. I'll catch the next bus back to Cuenca. Now you know what that meant? That meant waiting another hour or don't tell me how long before that bus came. But that was Bob's spirit. And just as he said that, the sun kind of came and hit his face. And I saw the light of God. I said to myself, there is a transfiguration. Here is this old gruff man that likes his rum from Canada, and he's down there digging in this ditch full of the sewer smell, and he's willing to stay until dark to finish the job because of love. You see, you don't care what container it comes in. You don't care what form it looks like. All you care about is the love that's shining through. And I saw it in Bob that day. And let me tell you, I had a lump in my throat all the way back to Cuenca, thinking about him down there digging in that ditch. But the final one I want to tell you about, I think you're beginning to get the point of what transfiguration looks like. But there's one more transfiguration that happened in that experience. And this is one that is even more amazing and powerful than the other two. And I don't mean to single these two people out. There are 3 people. There were so many others in that group. We saw transfiguration so many times, so many places. But this one, his name was Bruce. Bruce was a retired insurance salesman from Arizona. His face and his hands, as in Texas we say, it looked like a lizard skin. All wrinkled because of the sun he'd been in. And he had these big thick glasses that he wore. And his head was bald. But he was a kind and gentle man. And he had heard about the children from the get-go. And he decided to join with us. And he went down there and he played with the kids. And he did all the things that the rest of us did. But one of the things that was amazing about Bruce was that before we left, he made sure he hugged each one of those 35 children. He wouldn't leave until he had had a chance to hug each one of them that day. And we were inspired by that. And his presence was always appreciated. But you know, this group of people that came together, They were a phenomenal group, because not only did we have to go down there and help these children get food and get electricity and get water and get the plumbing together, it came upon us that they needed more than that. They needed all kinds of repairs. Their buildings were falling down. Rain was coming into their bedrooms. There was work to be done there that was absolutely amazing. And one of our group leaders, she said, we need to raise some money to help these people. We can't just do all of this by volunteers. And so we started getting estimates from plumbers and carpenters and people to do all this stuff. And eventually the figure came back, about $50,000. That's all we need. Wow, when we had that meeting, I remember, 50,000, that's a lot of money in Cuenca, Ecuador. But Bob was the one that looked at everybody through his thick glasses and said, why not? What a spirit. Why not? We can raise 50,000. What's the problem? You see? That's the spirit he had. And so we began to work on that. And we dreamed dreams of how we can raise that kind of money. And we started doing what we could do to figure out how to raise that money. And one of the ideas that I helped develop was that we could go around to every business in Cuenca, and ask them to donate gift certificates, which we could give away at a big gala. And therefore we could get lots and lots of money. They didn't have to give us any cash. All they gave us was these certificates that people could go to their business. They got new customers coming to their business. It was a win-win situation for everybody. And so we started going out into the community, 2 by 2, 1 by 1, as often as we could go, knocking on doors, going to the big corporations, going to anybody we could, telling them of the sadness of this situation in Yunguilla, and the certificates began to pour in. But you know who brought the most certificates every time we had a meeting? It was Bob. Bob did this relentlessly. Not just 1 day a week or 2 days a week. Every day he was out there on the sidewalks of Cuenca, going to this restaurant, going to this hostel, going to this place and that place, getting certificates for these children. And he would bring them back, and we would all marvel at what a great job Bob was doing. And then one day, Bob says, listen, I'm getting ready to go to a big printing company, and they're talking about giving us money. I've told them that we just want certificates, but they're talking about money, and I'd rather you go along with me so we can talk to them together about getting this money. So I said, sure, Bob, tell me where. I'll meet you. We'll get together. And we started walking over to where this printing shop was. It was only about 7 or 8 blocks away from where he lived, not a far walk. And so we were headed over that way, and I noticed that he was walking like this. And it just kind of bothered me, because I'd never seen anything wrong with him that much. And so I said, Bob, did you twist your ankle, Bob? Bob, it's okay. If you can't walk, we can call a taxi. And this is the kind of guy he was. He says, no, we don't need no taxi. That's less money for the children. Let's just walk on. So we walked on in silence. And then, as if he just felt like he needed to get it off of his heart, he said, you know, I'm sick. I said, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't know that. He said, yeah, I got stage 4 bone cancer. But I don't want you to tell anybody about it, because they'll try to stop me from doing this. And he said, this is the thing. If I couldn't do this, I'd be dead already. That's the kind of guy Bob was. I didn't know what to say. I was speechless. When somebody tells you they got stage 4 bone cancer, and they're out here walking, collecting money for these kids, what are you going to say? What are you going to say? I said to myself, wow, this is an amazing thing. And it was. But let me tell you the experience I had even more recently, where I saw the light that was in Bob more powerfully than I'd ever seen it before. Oh, I saw the light in his ability to go out and get the donations, and I saw the light in his ability to hug all those children. I saw that light. It was great. And after our event, he lived long enough to hear that we raised over $50,000. And he was rejoicing about that. And then, things kind of went on. Everybody went their own separate way. We all did our own kind of thing here and there. The group kind of broke up. And I lost touch with Bob. I don't know what happened to him. I didn't see him around on the streets much anymore. And I hoped and prayed that he was still with us. But I didn't see him anywhere. So a little bit later on, matter of fact, not more than 7 months ago, very recently, my wife and I decided one day to go eat at the Sunrise Cafe. Amazing, I'd never eaten there in 7 years. A lot of you have been to the Sunrise Cafe, I'm sure. There on Kayalari. I went in and sat down at the table and we made our order, and then I was just looking around. And I looked up on that column right over the cash register. You guys who've been there know it. And there was a picture of Bruce. It was one of those in memory pictures. Looking down on the tables where he sat almost every day drinking coffee. So I had to go up and ask one of the waiters. I asked him, I said, did you all know Bruce? And the waiter said, oh, did we know Bruce? He helped so many of us here. So many of the waiters, so many of the people that came into this place. And I told him, I said, I knew him too. And the waiter said, he was one of God's angels. I said, I agree 100%. So, we sat back down, and we've gone there several times since. And for some reason, and maybe you go there and look at the picture yourself, but when you look at it, there's this kind of reflection of a light that comes off of it. And I thought to myself, that's the transfiguration. Bruce is gone, but the light does not leave us. The light is here among us today. And that light through that picture reminds me that this is what transfiguration is all about. Bruce transfigured not only in this life, but in the life to come. He's now pure light. I don't have a doubt about it. Now, the final thing I'd like to say to you today, these two stories, I hope help you understand what was happening with Jesus' transfiguration. I hope it helps you to understand what's happening with your transfiguration. And I hope you understand the good news. And this is what I'm thankful for. We can be transfigured. Each and every one of us can be transfigured. People no longer have to see us as retired insurance salesmen, retired this, retired that. No. They can see the light of God in us. Nobody has to see us the way we are as human beings. From this day forward and for every day from now on, God has made it possible that we can be transfigured, transformed, made new, made different, made more like God, made more like love, made more like peace, made more like joy. That can happen to anyone here in this room today. It's a real thing. I've seen it. Transfiguration is not like what they do in Star Trek when Captain Kirk said, "Beam me up, Scotty." Y'all saw Star Trek. It's not some kind of flash of molecules and flash of light and some kind of weirdness. It's real human beings being changed into real God beings who are able to live as Christ would live in them, in this place, in this time. That's what real transfiguration is. And that's what we can do. And that's why I'm so thankful. I'm thankful we have a choice. Think about it. If you didn't have this choice, the only thing you could think of as far as life is concerned is that you would get older and grayer and dead. That would be your only hope. You've got no hope. No. But because of the Word here, because of what Jesus shows us, because of the Christ's presence in all of us, we can be more than just this fleshy, dying creature. We can be transfigured. And that's the choice we have. And it's not a hard choice to make. Would you be rather a person of flesh waiting to die, or would you rather be a person of light who lives forever? Which would you like? The choice is not hard. So then, my hope for everyone here at ICC and everyone in Quaker is that whatever mountaintop the Lord leads you to, it will be a mountaintop in which you will discover the bright light of God's presence in your life, so that people see that light and that there is no longer you there to see. Amen. Amen.